In this conversation, I sit down with Sinan Al Mokhtar about his experience living during the first Gulf War at the age of 8, as he watched his mother give birth to his twin siblings. And after Sinan shared that story about living through the first Gulf War, he told me that he had actually not talked about this experience since he was 8 years old. This is actually a very common way of enduring these moments of suffering in the Middle East. We often don't talk about war or the people we lost or kind of the fear that we had, and we often use sarcasm to deal with suffering.
I remember that my dad, they asked all doctors, all healthcare providers, not only doctors actually, like they were forced to join all hospitals because they were expecting like casualties, especially like if you're a surgeon, if you're like any like nurse, surgeon, ER doctor, it's wartime. Any physician, like they asked all physicians, all healthcare providers, like to join their hospitals, even if they're civilians. My mom, just because she just gave birth, we have maternity leave in Iraq, so she was under that. They didn't ask her to go back to the hospital. But my dad, and at that time, keep in mind, like we didn't have like even the phone lines. Everything went down. So when my dad would come, we would see him for a day, and then he would go away for like 2, 3 weeks, and then come back. And we had no way to check on my dad. That was the scariest part. And when you can't check on your relatives, you can't check on your friends because the lines were down. So that's the scary part. We just hear rumors. Oh, that neighborhood, that area was targeted yesterday, and there was bombing there, bombing here. And keep in mind, like again, like no electricity, no communications, just rumors. You hear it mouth to mouth. I think that was the scary part, especially for my mom. For me, I was 8, like I was happy, no school. But thinking back, like my mom was like it was horrible time for her. She just gave birth. She was on her own, and there was no way to communicate with the rest of the family.
Wow, yeah. I mean, if you were to ask your mom, what was going on in her head at the time, giving birth to 2 kids, actually twins on top of it, which is a lot of work in itself, and then not knowing where her husband is for so many weeks at a time, I can imagine. Did you talk to other family members or other people in the community who were able to help you? Or, I mean, did this bring you closer to your community, or did you feel like you just, remember being locked down?
So it's mainly lockdown, to be honest. I was allowed to go out. Like we had like a big garden. So I was allowed to invite other kids to come and play in our house. It's okay. People like kids from the street, like from our neighborhood, they were allowed to come in. I was not allowed to leave the house. But yeah, like no electricity. There is nothing else to do. We were playing soccer most of the time. And I remember like probably a month after like the real start of the war, my dad came, and he was talking about like robberies and like neighborhoods not being too safe. So probably the best approach for all of us to leave, like leave our house, lock everything, and just leave. And we went to a province south of Baghdad. We went to Karbala, and my family, we have like orchards, so it's a huge like land for agriculture and stuff, and has like let's say a huge ranch with a house in the middle, so no one would would reach you there. And besides, there is no shortage of anything like water, food. We know the neighbors, we know the people, so we ended up like literally going like to that farmhouse in the countryside, just like to make sure that, oh, we had a generator at that time over there in the farm, so like we will just stay there till we make sure Baghdad is safe again. So he came for, I remember, a few days. We took only like the most important documents, money, whatever, like valuables we can just put in the car. And then we went to the countryside. And my dad, like, I think he stayed for a few hours with us. And a couple of like families, like our relatives joined us there. And then my dad had to leave and go back to the hospital.
Wow. I'm just thinking about your mom again and how she would have been feeling during this time. Did you ever talk to her about it? Did you ever maybe talk to your siblings? I'm sure that they were too young, but sometimes you remember these things if there's a lot of trauma. Just curious if you ever had a conversation with your mom.
Um, for them, Yasmin, it's very tough because like Iraq had a war in the 70s before I was born, a war in the 80s, a war in the 90s, a war in 2003. So all their lives, like, it's been really tough. And like when I talk to my mom about these days, and I admire her courage, like, and like how hard it, I'm sure, like I can't remember the feelings, and I don't think we talked about this subject specifically, but like just thinking about like the hardship and like how difficult it was for her, it drives me nuts. But for her, she always like, she's sarcastic about this. Like, she's sarcastic because she said, like, we've been through that many times, like in Iraq, and now we're, it's sad to say that, but people get their way of coping with it, or like, I don't want to say desensitized, because no way you can be desensitized when it comes to such like big emotional things, and you're worried about your loved ones, you're worried about your family, you just gave birth to like two babies, and you don't know what's going to happen, where is your husband. And like in Iraq, like, it's like we reached that point. I remember this clearly, Yasmin. Like, I remember we had like so much cash at home, but there were no stores to buy food from. Everything was closed. So money meant nothing. You would expect, like, if you have money, probably you would be in better shape, but money meant nothing, like, at least for the first couple of weeks. Then, like, like, you would find things like probably tenfolds more expensive, but money meant nothing at the start of the war. People were so scared. And even for my dad, sometimes he would, like, for example, like, he would have time, he want to come, but there is no fuel. Like, everything was shut down, everything. Like, no gas stations, no electricity, no communications. So when I talk to my mom about these days, she's always sarcastic. She was like, we so worse than that. But I remember, like, the story, like when she came home and she was telling me and my aunt about this, that like she was like, the day she was giving birth, there was an explosion right next to the hospital, and they had no glass, like no windows. So she thought it's much safer. Like, even though she just gave birth, she was in a bad like health condition. It's much safer. She would go home and she would take care of herself, or like find someone to take care of her, than staying in the hospital. Because what if like the bombing like reached another part of the hospital? And the hospital itself, it's in the like center of Baghdad. So I don't want to say they were targeting the hospital, like, but probably something near the hospital, or you never know.
Do you remember like what was specifically targeted in the first Gulf War? Did you remember, was it mostly buildings? Were there, you mentioned neighborhoods. I imagine like there are a number of neighborhoods that were taken down. But yeah, if you could share, just curious, because I think so many people don't understand what it's like to live in a war zone and what it's like to come of age in a war zone, and what it's like to be on the receiving end of maybe a very unequal war. So I'd love for you to comment on what that was like. And also, I vaguely remember that the sanctions were happening, sometime around not that time, but right after. So I'm curious if you could also speak to that.
So, like target wise, like regarding the first question, Yasmin, I don't remember much because again, I was 8, so I can't remember details of like what was exactly targeted. But I know that when the army was withdrawing uh, from Kuwait, like they were coming back to Iraq, they had no defense, like air defenses, and I think we had no planes or like few planes in Iraq or something. So anyway, like they were easy targets, and many soldiers decided it's much safer for them to just walk back. And when I say walk back, we're talking about 600 like kilometers.
Wow.
So yeah, because like the like army vehicles were not safe; they were targeted. Like so, people like soldiers, especially like I don't know about officers. And the only reason why I remember this story specifically, because I remember the like later on when I was like a teenager, like we used to go like to this like social club, and the bartender used to tell us stories, just like his story of walking back from Kuwait to Baghdad, walking 600 kilometers. The guy, it was not like he was so traumatized, and everyone I remember like everyone was so nice to him because like he can't handle any stress.
Wow.
So yeah, but so that's your first, like the first question. And can you remind me what was the second question?
Yeah. So the second question is about the sanctions. Do you remember living through the sanctions or when they took place and how they affected your day to day? It's so interesting to me that, it sounds like there's just a sense of enduring, and you talk about your mom's sarcasm, which is so popular and common amongst the Iraqi diaspora and Iraqi communities. I think that, and that's probably true for like most of the Middle East. There's a lot of sarcasm and a lot of jokes, and I think it's really to be able to endure, and to just not let the suffering, kind of in the tougher moments in life get to you, and to just take things with stride. That's been at least my assessment.
Yeah, I think it's like like it's a very common defense mechanism among Iraqis. Not my generation. I even though like I witnessed these two wars, but I honestly I don't think like I suffered as much as my parents. When you talk to my parents, like my dad, for example, like when he talks about like the Iraqi Iranian war, the 8 years war, like yeah, Yasmin, you would be shocked, like the kind of stories you would hear. Like when you talk to my grandma, for example, like so my grandma had 4 kids, 4 like boys. Okay, my dad and 3 uncles, and they were 4 of them were drafted. Like I swear to God, when I remember when she told me the story, like like can you imagine? Like she has only 4 boys, and 4 of them were 4 of them are doctors, by the way. So they had nothing to do with military. They were so civilian, and 4 of them were drafted, and like to be like in the active military, not only doctors in the military. So she said, I still remember, may she rest in peace. She used to say that for 8 years of war, I was wearing black because I don't know when I'm gonna hear one of them like died for 8 years. And like when you think about it, like every time they let one of them like ends his service, she would be so happy, but she still think about the other three, like, and then like the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one. But so that again, like, I'm sorry, like, I know you're probably not interested in the 80s, but I'm just saying like that kind of hardship they faced. So that's why probably the sarcasm is like, you never know, it might get worse. So let's live now and see what's going to happen.
That's powerful. Yeah, man, that's a really tough situation to see all your children drafted, and then just to be in war for so long, right? From one decade to the
8 years.
next. Yeah, yeah, and then right after that, the first Gulf War. Do you remember, I guess, what was happening politically? Like what you remember maybe was happening, with the party, like what you were told. It's just interesting because I've heard that, the media, since it was controlled so much, what was shared with the Iraqi civilians and Iraqi community on TV was very different than what was happening outside of the country. What was your perception?
So I can't remember the first Gulf War, but the second Gulf War, we had electricity, we had communications, we had TV. Like the day Baghdad was fallen, I was in the hospital with my dad, and we had electricity. And till the same day, U.S. soldiers were in Baghdad airport. The government were saying we're victorious and we're gonna win this war and we're gonna teach them a lesson. Till like I would say till the last day before they take over like the transmission with the national Iraq TV, till the last day, like we were being told that we're victorious and we did this, we did that, and like I'm not sure if you saw that scene before in any documentary, but I think Al Sahaf, which was the guy who's responsible for the media and propaganda and stuff like that in Saddam's regime, this guy went to the airport and he was saying, "Hey, look at me!" Like they were shooting at the airport, and he was saying, like, filming at the airport, and he was saying, like, "Look at me! I'm at the airport." They're saying they took over the airport, and now it's funny because like when I watch the documentaries about what happened, Americans were literally in another part of the airport while they were filming, and so we were like the misleading was so much. What's the name of that novel? The novel 1948.
Oh yeah, George Orwell.
Yeah, yeah, like exactly, like it's exactly what it is. Like the kind of like propaganda. It was crazy, but we had no other way to know what's happening. Like a couple of my uncles at that time, they were outside Iraq, like in the second Gulf War, and after a very very nice experience with the first one. So we like even when they call us, we're so scared to say anything or ask anything because everyone is so worried that your phones are being like monitored or like they're gonna listen to you, and if you say something you should not have said, probably you're gonna go to prison or even worse, being executed. So that kind of propaganda was crazy. It was so bad that in our household, like in our living room, my dad, if he wanted to say something about Saddam, he wouldn't mention his name. He would say that guy. You know how
Yeah.
bad it is? Like you're in your you're in your living room and still you don't dare to say something about Saddam.
Yeah, I mean, life under a dictatorship, right? Wow, you have to get creative, I guess, to communicate.
Oh yeah.
Sinan, I have so many other questions, and I know that we're coming up at time. I have two more questions I wanted to ask you because
Please.
I think they're so interesting. There's so many cool stories here to just, well, I wouldn't say cool stories, but just like stories that like I think remind us of our humanity, really. Um, there's, you spoke a little bit at the beginning about seeing two of your classmates get shot on their way to, was it to class or
Hospital.
the hospital
It was, yeah.
in medical school? So, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe why that happened, and was it happening on a larger scale? And then I want to transition into your experience of moving to the United States and what it's been like for you, and what the experience of being a hyphenated American has been.
So to answer the first question, I don't understand why doctors were targeted, but I would say most of my family in healthcare, and it's a it used to be a very common thing. The way we think about it or thought about it at that time, that they were doctors, usually like the community would know the doctor. So when you're targeting someone that people know and need, you're creating some kind of chaos in the community. Probably that's the whole idea, but for some reason doctors were targeted. And my medical school, and like later on, like the hospital that I work for, it's called like Baghdad Medical City, which is like the most advanced tertiary center in Baghdad, next to like Baghdad like university medical school. So cause we're on the river, right on the river on Tigris, and across the river there is this neighborhood called Haifa, Shara Haifa, with Haifa streets, and um, there were many non-Iraqi and Iraqi militias who are anti-America and anti-new government. They were pro the previous regime, and they were sniper, like they used like I think some kind of like snipers or something. I don't know what it is, but literally across the river, when they see someone wearing a white coat, they would target him or her. So like what we used to do, because they can see us, like daylight. So I would like carry like a small backpack that has my squabs and my white coat, and I won't change till I'm inside the hospital. And what we had to do, because the hospital facing the river, we had to close all the curtains within the hospital that's facing the river because we were scared of the snipers across the river. Because all these, like, I won't say high rise buildings, I would say like probably like six, seven floors buildings, lots of snipers who were trying to like shoot at doctors, thinking that the hospital is helping keeping the country together, and that they didn't want things to calm down and things to get better. So targeting doctors, I think, or at least like that's the only thing that makes sense in my head. um they were trying to make a chaos.
Wow, that's terrifying on so many levels.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I'm sorry. Just like regarding these two guys, one of them passed away. Unfortunately, it was really sad. I knew him, and we ended up like when we graduated, we called like that year. We named it after his name. So we would choose a name for each, like each year, like when people graduate medical school, like for example, you say class like 2019, 2018, we called it like we put like his name next to the year uh, for this, the first one. And the second one, thank God, like it was, he got wounded, like, and I think they shot him in the shoulder, and we were able like to take him to the emergency room, and he was devastated. And I'm not sure he left Iraq too, by the way. I think he's in Sweden now or somewhere. But yeah, yeah.
What was the name of your class?
Ali Abdel Jalil, the guy who passed away.
Hmm. Wow. So, Sinan, I want to, move into like your journey into America and also what it's been like now. I mean, you said, I believe that you came to the United States in 2010. So you've been here for about 11 years. And yeah, what has it been like for you to kind of contrast your experience and now as a, I guess, hyphenated American? What has that been like?
So again, like I didn't spend all the 11 years here. I've been going back and forth between US and Middle East. I traveled a lot as well. I've been to many places for work and backpacking. But um, I I just want to say something as an immigrant here in US. When I weighed at that time, like when I was weighing like which country to go to, I had this really really good image, like perfect image about US. The more I'm living here and the more I learn and I understand what's happening, like when I'm looking at, so, I live in Chicago, for example, and when you see how segregated the city is, when you look at so many like social determinants of health here in the city, when you see like what happened last year, like with Black Lives Matters, like when you see like there is so much to be done in US.